All right, what is up, Counter-Strike Nation? Welcome back in. We are here with another Pickems video, of course, with me, Scriv. Cowboy hat is back. I don't know, when I wore the CS hat, it actually went quite well. But when I wore the Cowboy hat, we obviously didn't do too well on the opening stage. Here's the opening stage, right? You've seen it. Here's the Elim stage. Did pretty well here. Little stinky, Mongols went through. Could have been all ticks here. That would have been nice. Let me show final. Yeah, so we had Mongols going in, and of course they went 3-0, so we don't get it. Na'Vi, what the heck happened there? But beyond that, we did, pretty well. Shame about Big. It would have been nice to see them, get a little bit further, get a BO3. Yeah, just give us a bit more, because obviously they did so well in the opening stage. Furia going out 0-3. Obviously we didn't have... Actually, wait, no, that's what I had Furia going, sorry. They actually did pretty well, made it to sort of the very final hurdle for this Brazilian team in the tournament. So, credit to them. I was down on Furia, but they actually played pretty well. Beyond that, going sort of wet and middling, which I think is pretty much what everybody did. There was not that much controversy coming in, and it paid off. Right, so into the actual teams themselves... I have obviously done this a little bit late. I've been busy today. Wasn't up late enough yesterday for it to drop and everything. Most of the videos have been coming out today. That being the 9th of December. Christmas in full swing here in the Western Hemisphere. But either way, a lot of very, very differing opinions. Maui goes G2 all the way because of firepower. I think I saw Vince putting, it might have been Pimp putting Maus over Mongols. Most people putting Mongols to at least make it to the final. I think we did have Vince putting Spirit making it deep. So lots and lots of different ones that I've been watching. To be honest with you, I think we've got Hawk has got Vitality to win the whole thing. So it's sort of all over the place, right? In the community, it felt like in Copenhagen there was a lot of consensus. Most people put Spirit to win. They didn't. I believe they went out in the quarter there, actually, against FaZe. Ultimately, nobody put Na'Vi to win. So, it really was one of those unlikely sort of stories. And if Na'Vi had made it through here 3-0 or 3-1, I think a lot of people might also have been up on them to keep going. But obviously, they were down and out. So, kind of wild there. That said, let's crack straight into it. We're going to start with the top one. I got to be up on the Mongols. I do feel that we have a lot of people riding the wave pretty hard in the sense that, they've obviously gone 3-0 and then 3-0 again, which I think is unexpected, surprising a lot of people. They already beat Maus in the BO1. It's a little bit close there, to be fair. So, can you really ride on that all that much? Probably not. But all the same, I at least think that they'll get past Maus. Maus, it feels like, alongside maybe Heroic, are the two teams that a lot of people are just sort of overlooking. But the Mongols are all coming together at a very, very good time. Sensu's having, one of his best tournaments, 9-10, really coming into his own. And then you've got Mzinho filling all the gaps. And they call a very unpredictable, very confident kind of style. But the one thing that I think we have to think for this year is that they haven't delivered on those bigger stages. They've won some tournaments, of course, this year, but a few of the bigger, heavier hitters are missing from those tournaments. One of them as well in the form of Misa, they absolutely should have won. It would have been a surprise if they didn't, given the ilk of other teams that were there. And, of course, it's a very young team, right? So you do have to bear that in mind. It comes into play alongside also Maus, to be fair, in that sense. They're a very, very young squad, so I think when it comes to things like pressure and like seeing everybody picking them in the Pickems and all this sort of stuff, it is going to get to them. I'm a guy that leans quite heavily on the mental side of things, and I think that for me, it will eventually cause them some issues, but in the same vein, they have the opportunity to sort of prove me wrong on that and actually overcome and prove that they're a great team and should be considered blah, blah, blah. But I also, as well as liking the mental, tend to err on the side of caution. So, yes, I have them going through against Maus here, but when it comes to this next matchup, which I think Spirit are going to take, Donk and Shiro both looking pretty good this tournament. I think Shiro still misses the gap in a few places, but Donk, I don't know. Like, what more can you say, really? Like, it's his tournament. It's such a big tournament for 3 players as well in the conversation of player of the year. One being him, of course, the other being Munacy, the other being Zaiwu. So, I think that is going to spur him forwards. And there's a little bit more experience within Team Spirit. So, on this side of the bracket, I am actually going to go with Team Spirit. I think that the Mongols run has to come to an end somewhere. I'd like to be up on the Mongols. I'd like to be big on the Mongols. They did surprise me in the Elim stage to not just slip and drop one. And the thing is, you go 3-0, you go 3-0. Like I say, you've got to make a mistake somewhere, surely, is that logical breadth that we generally tend to lean on as pundits. And again, as I say, I err on the side of caution a little bit. So when I am thinking about it and when I'm going with what my opinion is, rather than just sort of like, yeah, the community's big on them. There's a few of the analysts and the pundits and whatnot out there that are also big on them. But I think that for me, they have to slip up somewhere. The question that sort of remains is like, will it be against Spirit? Because there are still a couple of pieces, Magisk and Chopper. I don't know whether they will be able to work against the firepower, because we've already mentioned the big names in Mongols, but Blitz is a great fragging in-game leader, of course, and I think that because of that, they can be actually quite difficult. He is very capable. They're a great pistol team, all this kind of stuff. So I think that we do need the likes of Magix and Zontix to pick it up for Team Spirit. That being said, Zontix is also having a decent tournament, so I think that there should be room here for Spirit to take them. Now, on the other side of things, I'm going to we'll continue in order. I think for me, it does have to be G2. Like I said, I watched the Maui Pickem, and it's a really nice one to watch. It's nice and condensed, nice and quick. He's just getting straight into it, straight through it, and obviously done a bit of pre-planning for the ideas that he has. So it comes out very, very cleanly. And I do kind of agree with the argument that where the game is at, where MR12 is at, you can just sort of brute force things through. And G2 are playing some of their simplest sort of Counter-Strike when it comes from that calling perspective. That might be a dead horse at this point. I'm not the only one to say that, right? I think it was Hawker that sort of first pointed out for me where on one of the Mirage games, he just called like the same, Snacks just called the same 3 executes in a row, the exact same round, which maybe doesn't have as much depth as, they would potentially like. But, yeah, I think that allows the likes of Nico and Munacy in particular, but, Malbs is obviously coming into his own. Hunter's been slowly picking it up. I think having Snacks on the team gives him a lot more room to work with. It's not as advanced. It's not as much thinking. It's a lot of, clicking and fighting and whatnot. And that feels like what a lot of these players just want and have to sort of prove themselves. That being said, Heroic is not going to be super easy for them. They've also been playing a pretty good tournament. There's a few maps in there. They will probably clash on like the Mirage and whatnot, which has been a pretty good one for Heroic. But yeah, there's just a little bit lacking from the team. It's almost there. I think if they can get it, and if they can get a couple of their players, like a Nertz and Dexter sort of break through the ceiling, then maybe it could be done. And maybe on the big stage, that's where it happens, right? This is the sort of make or break that we're talking about. Mongols, Heroic could be a team that maybe they have a few of those individuals take over. So this, for me, actually, I think might be one of the better quarterfinals. This one at the top also could be there. I'm happy to kind of concede that these two could go the other way, but you just feel like G2's firepower is way, way, way too much to deal with. And that combined with the experience of Snacks in these high octane moments of a tournament, and of course Nico, and of course Hunter, I think that they, and Taz as well, sort of behind them. This is where Taz is kind of going to come into his own as the coach, I think, and that sort of IGL past, he will be able to really lift them up and keep the spirits high. And just get them in the right mindset going in, your Munacy and your Malbs in particular. Or maybe, Nico a little bit will also need some help because he's obviously had some pretty tough runs when it comes to major playoffs and, getting so close, not once, but twice. Yeah, I think it really will make a big difference having Taz behind them. So when it comes to the bottom side, FaZe have been getting a lot of stick. Really, Carrigan's having a tough tournament from a personal perspective, but when it comes to the game, I think it's allowed him to, as he can in times of tragedy and grief and whatnot, just really focusing on the work and, maybe have that emotional overload post-event, unfortunately for him, which is a difficult thing, of course, but it is the nature of being a competitor, as you can't take the time off and you have to remain present in the game no matter what is going on, the classic Michael Jordan with the food poisoning and whatnot. But the issues, it feels, it's more Brokey and Rops, I think, are the two that have been getting a lot. Frozen is doing well, but not amazing. Rain is always consistent, but, he's not quite hitting the levels towards the top end of the scoreboard that he was maybe getting, when they had their win in 22. So I think because of that, they're sort of playing against a Vitality here that is coming together quite nicely. There's a bit more fluidity to them, but they're a very balanced team. They really know how to play the game. As a squad, obviously everybody here knows how to play the game, but you know what I mean? They really know how to play their game, I think, is maybe a better way of putting it. And therefore, they can facilitate their pieces a little more effectively. For me, do they have the ceiling to go super deep? That I'm not so sure of, but I can see here Vitality beating out FaZe just because FaZe are missing some of their identity. You always have to put the caveat on that it's like they have probably 3 players in there. In Carrigan, maybe not on an individual level, but in terms of like a locking in, reading the game level. And then someone like Rain and someone like Brokey that can just sort of turn it on in the big games, when there's something for them to get excited about and really get engaged into the game, and it's not just another group stage, it's not just another, there's really quite big stakes going on. I think that they are players that can definitely step up, but for me, I feel like this FaZe Clan roster needs a change, and they're going to start to feel it after this tournament, and maybe in a sense, it would be better for them to not pick up the major, because they'll probably stick together a bit longer, and I don't know how well that will actually go for them, dead team walking kind of vibe. Here it's a little harder. We have the firepower conversation. We have the balance conversation. I think a lot of different people would have differing opinions when it came to these two teams. But for me, there is a little bit of heart in there. Mezzy, the UK player, not mentioned him yet. He's also been looking pretty good. And finding a bit more of that confidence. You see it in a lot of the interviews, right, at like pro leagues and stuff, especially when they're a bit more laid back and they're all sat together. Confidence. He needs to believe in himself a bit more, is what Apex has said quite a few times. Seems like he's finding that, dad buff maybe. But also UK player, and I know him. He's probably like the only pro that I actually know on a bit more of a personal level. So for that reason, in a tough one to call, I'm going to go with the emotional cop-out answer, I suppose. Now, when it comes down to the final, it does feel a bit wacky here. There's a part of me that wants to put the Mongols here because everybody's like, Mongols. They're going to do it. It's in Shanghai. It's close enough to where they're from, this kind of thing. But I think I have to stick to my guns. They surely have to falter somewhere. Now, in terms of where this final goes, it is a challenge to predict. But I think it swings for Vitality, to be honest. We have to remember they were probably the one team for me that came kind of, closest and within relative touching distance of beating Na'Vi at Copenhagen, but just a few sideways calls and a few difficult sort of moments for Apex in particular on that Inferno. I think that he will really have learned from that, and I think that we are going to see kind of the better version of Vitality, and they have been quietly finding success. People expect them to do very well in the elimination stage. They obviously skip through because of the RMR and whatnot, the opening stage. So maybe not see them play as much Counter-Strike, but when it comes to the comparison of like the Mongols, everyone was a little quieter on them and not expecting that amount of success. But Vitality, everyone's like, yeah, expected, and I think that when we look at the likes of the Mongols and FaZe, maybe G2 a little bit. This feels like our most stable team that's still in it. You would probably argue that Na'Vi would be the most stable team coming into top team anyway, coming into the tournament, but obviously they've not made it this far, so I guess they're not the most stable team, but we know that now. So yeah, I think this is the way that I'm going to go. Vitality feel just sort of clean enough and playing a good enough game. I think there is still, and what's maybe changed coming into this tournament for them that brightens a few eyes across the scene, is that it does feel a little more fluid. It's not necessarily loose or whatever, but we do obviously have these rumors around moves and whatnot, so that might be having an effect. But I also just think that potentially, because of those rumors, you know, some players get more sway to say, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that, and I want to take certain little bits off of different players, actually. But it just feels like they are smooth enough, I think, to make it through. They've not had any hiccups. Same, I guess, with the RMR if we want to roll back that far. So we'll see. There's a couple in here. I think the heroic game, they might surprise a few people. I think Mongols could indeed beat Spirit, right? The clash of the, you know, heavy fraggers and, you know, gunners and whatnot. But I just think that Vitality will cleanly move through. Hard to deal with. A little harder to read than usual, but still playing probably the most thought out version of Counter-Strike that we've got from all these teams. You know, they play a game that they're able to lean on, that they're able to rely on, and it's not quite as, I wouldn't say random, but, you know, unpredictable is definitely a good way of putting it. We have seen, this is the big thing with the Mongols, we've seen them recently sort of spin back in and start to bring a little bit more structure than earlier tournaments, right? And maybe saving the strats and all that for the majors, as they say. But at the end of the day, I think that this, for me, feels most comfortable. There's a little bit of heart in there, definitely for this matchup. This is probably the one that I'm doubting the most, just because, you know, Maui's very nearly sold me on just pure brute force firepower being one of the win conditions of the current state of the game. But once it gets to here, I think Vitality will take it. But that is going to do us. Very, very exciting times. Obviously, we're only still on for the gold. It's unfortunate. Very, very close. You know, there's a lot of people, because of the way that elimination stage, that are on for the diamond. So, you know, it might have been, quote unquote, when we look back in history, one of the easier majors in recent memory to get a diamond in. But we shall find out. Hearts will be broken here moving into the playoffs. I'm absolutely sure of that. So, yeah. Thank you very much if you made it to the end. Thank you for watching, and your continued support is always appreciated. I'll catch you in the next one.